Now with job order, it's very, very similar. I'm sorry, it's very, very simple. Okay? Actually, show me if you can looking at this slide. If you have a number of different houses being built, right, it's very easy to accumulate the costs to each house, right? And it's pretty much easy to determine when the house is done, right? The house is either not done or it's finished. It's completed, right? And there's only one job. You're keeping track of one house and one job, okay? So it's pretty easy to move the costs from work in process inventory to finished goods inventory in a job order costing situation. Because think of Blake's parents' house being built. You have all the costs on that job sheet. Is the house completed? It is now completed. All the costs on this job cost sheet, that's what work in process inventory is, and it's going to get moved to finished goods inventory, right? But it is a little bit more difficult with process costing, okay? What we're going to see is the cost of goods transferred to finished goods is going to equal the number of completed units times the cost per equivalent unit. The cost per equivalent unit. And that is how we'll determine the numbers that go into that journal entry. Now, I introduced a new term here, equivalent unit. We're going to talk about that here in a second and for a few minutes, okay? What are equivalent units of production? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, let's understand that we do accumulate costs for a period of time, okay, either by process or department. And then we want to figure out our unit cost. Well, how do we do that in Chapter 20, Process Costing? We divide those accumulated costs by the number of equivalent units produced in the period, okay? Now, what is an equivalent unit? Equivalent units is a concept that expresses a number of partially completed units as a smaller number of fully completed units, okay? So what they say, they give you an example of 2 1/2 full pitchers are equivalent to 1 full pitcher of water, right? Okay? That's pretty math, okay? Science, okay? So 4,000 units that are 60% complete would total 2,400 equivalent units, okay? Now they're going to give you an example in the next slide. It's not my favorite example. I have an example that I like better that I'll show you here in a couple minutes, okay? But let's look at the example that they have for equivalent units on the next slide. Let's say for a current period, Pencil Co., they started 15,000 units and they completed 10,000 units, okay? They completed. Those are 100% done. But there's 5,000 units that are in process and they are only 30% complete, okay? How many equivalent units of production did Pencil Company have for the period? Well, you'd have the 10,000 units that are 100% complete, right? And if you wanted, you could take 10,000 times 100%. But then you also have the 5,000 units that are 30% complete. 30% of 5,000 is 1,500. Add that to the 10,000, and that equals 11,500 equivalent units. All right? Now, what is our cost per equivalent unit? Well, we take our product costs divided by those equivalent units that we calculated. For example, if Pencil Company incurred $27,600 in production costs during the period, what is the cost per equivalent unit for the period? You with me? Well, we would take $27,600 divided by the 11,500 equivalent units, and we would get $2.40 per equivalent unit. Does that make sense? Okay, cool? All right. Well, let's take a look at an example that I think I like a little bit better, okay? And it goes back to this slide, all right? It goes back to this slide of The difference being how we come up with the numbers that go into this and figuring out the cost per equivalent unit. Are you with me? Okay. Let me do an example real quick. Okay? Let me do an example real quick. Let me switch over to the document camera. All right? Let's say that somebody has a lawn mowing business. Okay? Let's say that somebody has a lawn mowing business. And let's say for that day, they spend $25 on gasoline. Okay? And that's really the main cost. They own their lawnmower, so that's mainly the cost that they have that day. I'm making obviously a simple example. Okay? So let's draw some lawns here. And let's say that this is all in the same little cul-de-sac here. Okay? So this guy gets up early, and he goes to this cul-de-sac, and there are, what, 7 houses with 7 lawns there, right? Okay, so let's say what he does, he has a full day, he starts early in the morning on a Saturday. He's one of these people who mows their lawns while you're trying to sleep in on a Saturday, okay? Well, he mows this complete lawn right here, okay? He mows this complete lawn right here, okay? He mows this complete lawn right here. You with me? Okay? Now, it's a little bit after lunch, and he knows that these people wanted to have their lawns mowed, but he does not think that they're going to, he doesn't think he's going to be able to finish all 4 of these remaining lawns. So what he does is instead of mowing 2 lawns and having them be happy with them and completely not touching these 2 lawns, and they're mad at him, he goes ahead and says, I'm going to mow the front lawns of all 4 of these houses. Are you with me? So for this house, that is 1/2, okay? For this house, let's say that's 2/3, okay? My lines might be a little bit off. Okay? For this lawn, it is also 1/2. And for this lawn, it is 2/3 as well. Okay. Are you following me, guys? Are you tracking with me? So on that day, he mowed these 3 lawns completely, started and completed. But on these 4 houses, he just mowed the front lawns near the street. Okay? Well, he spent $25 in gasoline, right? He spent $25 in gasoline. Okay? Now, do you see where the problem is as far as figuring out how much gasoline he spent on a lawn? Okay? Because of these partially completed units. Now, come off that for a second. Do you realize, though, you don't have this problem in job order? Because you have one job. You have the costs for that one job, correct? And it's easy to know what the costs for that job are. But look at the screen. If you have $25 on gasoline and you have this situation, what do you do? Can I see your calculator there, Matt? I forgot mine. Okay? Well, let me show you what you do. You're going to figure out the equivalent units, okay? And so what we have here is we have 1, 1, 1. That's 1 plus 1 plus 1, plus 1/2 plus 1/2, plus 2/3 plus 2/3. You with me? So let's figure out how many equivalent units that is. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's 5 1/3. Okay? 5 1/3 equivalent units. You with me? So now what we can do is we can take that $25 divided by 5.333 equivalent units, and what we will get is we'll get about $4.69 per equivalent unit. Does that make sense? And that would be helpful to know how much gas he spends on a lawn. But you had to figure out the equivalent units. Does that make sense, guys? Okay.